Chapter 15 Monopoly. Our objective is to answer the following questions. Why do monopolies arise? Why is marginal revenue less than the price for a monopolist? How do monopolies choose their price and output? How do monopolies affect society's well-being? What can the government do about monopolies? What is price discrimination? Introduction. Monopoly is defined as a firm that is the sole seller of a product without close substitutes. Monopoly has market power, and that is the ability to influence the market price of the product it sells. A competitive firm has no market power. Monopoly arise due to barriers to entry. Barriers means no other firms cannot enter the market to compete with the monopolies. There are three barriers to entry why monopolies arise. Number one, monopoly resources. A single firm owns a key resource. For example, De Beers of South Africa owns most of the world's diamond mines. Government regulation can be a barrier to entry. The government gives a single firm the exclusive right to produce the good. For example, patents and copyright laws. Number three, production process is another barrier to entry and gives rise to natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is a single firm that can produce the entire market output at lower cost than could several firms. For example, 1,000 homes need electricity. Average total cost is lower if one farm services all 1,000 homes than if two farms compete and service 500 homes each. So it is better to have one farm to serve the entire population of 1,000 homes instead of have two farms serving 500 homes each, at which case cost will be higher. Comparing monopoly to competition, looking at the demand curves, a competitive firm's demand curve is horizontal. In a competitive market, the market demand curve slopes downward, but the demand curve for any individual firm's product is horizontal at the market price. The firm can increase output without lowering price, so marginal revenue equals the price for the competitive firm. Monopolist demand curve. A monopolist is the only seller, so it faces the market demand. In other words, the monopolist is the market, so it faces the demand curve. To sell a larger output, the firm must reduce profit. Very important distinction. A competitive firm can sell all it wants at the market at the price because the competitive firm is a price taker. But a monopolist is a price maker. It is facing a downward sloping demand curve. If you want to increase sales, you must lower the price. You must obey the law of demand. So let's look at this active learning exercise. You can see column number one is output 0 through 6. And very important, price is no longer given. Remember, in a competitive model, the price was a given. I think it was $10 here. But here, if you charge $4.50, you sell 0. You charge $4, you sell 1. You want to sell 2, lower the price. You want to sell 3, lower the price. And so we have a different total revenue. Total revenue is still price times quantity. That is how you come up with this column. The average revenue and the marginal revenue. So here you can see that price is still the same as average revenue. Okay, so you find that this column is still the same as this column. Okay, but marginal revenue is now less than the price. This is marginal revenue. It is different from the price. Under a competitive market, this column is the same as this column. Under monopoly, marginal revenue is less than the price. And common ground D and demand and marginal revenue. Okay, marginal revenue, there's a demand curve is down sloping. That's the monopolist demand curve. You plot it from this information. Marginal revenue is below the demand curve because the monopolist has to lower the price to sell more. That is why marginal revenue is less than the price. So, understanding the monopolist's marginal revenue, increasing output has two effects on revenue. There's output effect, which means higher output raises revenue. There's price effect. Lower price reduces revenue. So, marginal revenue is less than the price. To sell a larger output, the monopolist must reduce the price on all the units it sells. Is negative if marginal revenue is negative if price effect is greater than output effect. For example, when common grounds increase output from 5 to 6. Profit maximization. Like a competitive firm, a monopolist maximizes profit by producing the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Sets the highest price consumers are willing to pay for that quantity. Remember, a monopolist has market power, so it can adjust the price. It finds this price from the demand curve. And this is a typical monopolist demand and marginal revenue, and then we impose a marginal cost curve. So, the profit maximizing output is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This does not change whether we are talking about a monopolist or a competitive firm. Profit maximizing output is where upsloping marginal cost curve crosses downsloping marginal revenue curve. If to find the price that a monopolist will charge, you'll have to extend this from the marginal revenue, marginal cost equality point up to the demand curve, and then drop the perpendicular on the horizontal axis. And then you impose average total cost. As with competitive firm, the monopolist profit equals price minus average total cost times output. So establish the point, the profit maximizing level of output, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Extend it to the demand curve to find the price. You drop the perpendicular on the vertical axis, and that is where you read the price. Where the same line crosses average total cost, you drop the perpendicular on the vertical axis and read average total cost. So the price is the area of this rectangle. Price minus ATC times Q. Monopoly does not have a supply curve. A competitive firm takes price as given and therefore has a supply curve that shows how its output depends on price. A monopoly firm is a price maker. Output does not depend on price. Output and price are jointly determined by marginal cost, marginal revenue, and the demand curve. Hence, no supply curve for a monopoly. In a case study, monopoly versus generic drugs. And this is comparing monopoly and generic drug. There's a horizontal marginal cost curve, downsloping demand curve, and marginal revenue below it as usual. Patents on new drugs give temporary monopoly to sellers. The market for a typical drug is determined on the horizontal axis where demand crosses marginal cost. So when the patent expires, the market becomes competitive and generics appear in the market. And as you can see, price will fall from monopoly price down to competitive price. The welfare cost of monopoly. Recall that competitive market equilibrium is where price equals marginal cost and the total surplus is maximized. In the case of a monopoly equilibrium, price is greater than marginal revenue, and marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The value to buyers of an additional unit, which is, you read the price, exceeds the cost of the resources needed to produce that unit. That's why price is higher than marginal cost. The monopoly output is too low, and therefore we could increase total surplus with a larger output. Monopoly results in a deadweight loss. And this is welfare cost of monopoly. Competitive equilibrium is at this point where the demand curve crosses marginal cost curve. That is competitive equilibrium. A price equals marginal cost at that point. Total surplus is maximized. Total surplus is maximized. Monopoly equilibrium, because marginal revenue is below the demand curve, monopoly will produce at Q sub M here, which is a output below the competitive equilibrium. A monopoly will charge a higher price. Remember, you have to go to the demand curve to establish the price. And this is a monopoly price, and this is marginal cost. For a monopoly, price is greater than marginal cost. For a competitive firm, price equals marginal cost. Therefore, at this point, there is deadweight loss. Value to buyers is still higher than marginal cost. And therefore, for this market to achieve equilibrium, a competitive equilibrium, we'll need to increase output from QM to QC. So this triangle, the green triangle, is the deadweight loss due to inefficiencies associated with the monopoly market model. Price discrimination. What is price discrimination? A condition where a monopoly sells the same good at different prices to different buyers. A firm can increase profit by charging a higher price to buyers with a higher willingness to pay. This requires the ability to separate customers according to their willingness to pay, and therefore can raise economic welfare. Perfect price discrimination. Perfect price discrimination. Charge each customer a different price, exactly his or her willingness to pay. Monopoly firm gets the entire surplus, and there is no deadweight loss. If a monopoly can perfectly price discriminate, the deadweight loss does not exist. Single price monopoly. Here, the monopolist charges the same price, and that's the PM, to all buyers. The monopoly does not have the ability to perfectly price discriminate. Therefore, the consumer surplus is this area, this triangle. Remember, under perfect price discrimination, All this area goes to the monopolist. That's why we call it perfect price discrimination. But a single price monopolist, there is a consumer surplus. And the monopoly profit is this yellow rectangle. And there is a deadweight loss. This triangle is the deadweight loss due to inefficiencies associated with a monopoly, or market distortion rather. Perfect price discrimination versus single price monopoly. Here, the monopolist produces the competitive quantity, but charges each buyer his or her willingness to pay. This is called perfect price discrimination. The monopolist captures the entire consumer surplus. There's zero consumer surplus. But there is no deadweight loss. In a weird way, this is efficient. Price discrimination in the real world. Perfect price discrimination is not possible in the real world. No firm can tell every buyer's willingness to pay. Remember, it requires a firm to know the consumer's willingness to pay to be able to charge them that willingness to pay. Buyers do not reveal it to the sellers. So, price discrimination, firms divide customers into groups based on some observable traits. What that is likely related to willingness to pay, such as age. Example of price discrimination, movie tickets, discounts for seniors, students, and people who can attend during weekday afternoons. They have lower willingness to pay than people who pay full price on Friday nights. So there's price discrimination in movie tickets. You go during the afternoons, you pay less. You go at 7 o'clock on Friday night, you pay more. What about airline prices? Discounts for Saturday night stayovers, business travelers, higher willingness to pay versus more price sensitive leisure travelers. So monopolies will charge business customers higher because they have higher willingness to pay, and charge leisure travelers who are price sensitive less. That is price discrimination in the real world. What about discount coupons? People who have time to clip and organize coupons are more likely to have lower income and lower willingness to pay than others. Need-based financial aid. Low-income families have lower willingness to pay for their children's college education. Schools price discriminate by offering need-based aid to low-income families. Quantity discount. A buyer's willingness to pay often declines with additional units, so firms charge less per unit for large quantities than small ones. For example, a movie theater charges $4 for a small popcorn and $5 for a large one that is twice as big. Public policy toward monopolies. Number one, increasing competition with antitrust laws. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914. These were congressional acts aimed at increasing competition in the market. They prevent mergers, they break up companies, and prevent companies from coordinating their activities to make markets less competitive. Ask the experts. Airline mergers. If regulators had not approved mergers in the past decade between major networked airlines, travelers would be better off. Well, 45% are uncertain, 29% agree, and 26% disagree. What about regulation? Regulate the behavior of monopolies. Set the monopolist price. This is common in case of natural monopolies, where marginal cost is less than average total cost at all output level. So marginal cost pricing would result in loss. So what does a regulator do? The regulator might subsidize the monopolist or set the price equal to ATC for a zero economic profit. Number three, public ownership. How the ownership of the farm affects the cost of production. Private owners have incentive to minimize costs. Public owners, that would be the government, if it does a bad job, losses are the losers are the customers and the taxpayers. Public ownership is usually less efficient since no profit motive to maximize profit. Or number four, do nothing. Some economists argue that it is often best for government not to try to remedy the inefficiencies of monopoly pricing. Determining the proper role of government in the economy requires judgments about politics as well as economics. The prevalence of monopoly. Pure monopoly is rare in the real world. Many firms have market power due to selling a unique variety of a product or having a large market share and few significant competitors. In many such cases, most of the results from this chapter apply, including markup of price over marginal cost and deadweight loss. Summary. A monopoly is a firm that is the sole seller in its market. A monopoly arises when a single firm owns a key resource, when the government gives a firm the exclusive right to produce a good, or when a single firm can supply the entire market at a lower cost than many firms could. A monopoly faces a downsloping demand curve for its product. Monopoly increases production by 1 unit, and that causes the price of its good to fall, which reduces the amount of revenue earned on all units produced. Marginal revenue is always below the price. A monopoly firm maximizes profit by producing the quantity at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Monopoly sets the price at which the quantity is demanded, where price is greater than marginal cost, a price is greater than marginal revenue, and price is greater than marginal cost. A monopoly's profit maximizing level of output is below the level that maximizes the sum of consumer and producer surplus and causes deadweight losses. A monopolist can often increase profits by charging different prices for the same good based on the buyer's willingness to pay. Price discrimination can raise economic welfare. Perfect price discrimination, the deadweight loss of monopoly, is completely eliminated under perfect price discrimination. Policymakers can respond to the inefficiency of monopoly behavior in four ways. One, use antitrust laws to try to make the industry more competitive. Regulate the prices that the monopoly charges. turn the monopolists into a government-run enterprise, or do nothing at all.